Hello, I'm here with Doug to talk about the space junk cleaner and other things. It's Tuesday, April 30, 2024. And first, you got the layoffs at Tesla.
Yeah, so wait, is this a vacuum cleaner for space?
It's supposed to be that. It's supposed
All
to.
right, well, we'll talk
There's
about
so
that.
much
All
space,
right.
space junk we've been talking about for years on this podcast. Caitlin and I getting all upset about it. And I kept saying, isn't there some way to do anything about it? And somebody in Japan thinks they can do something.
Yeah, well, we also need to do the oceans too, don't we?
We do. I've seen several devices out there actually
Yeah,
doing that, but it's sort of like carbon capture from the air. They're doing like 1 part per million of what needs to be done.
I think it's 1 part per billion, but
Something like it. Yes.
yeah, something like that. All right. So let's talk about the big story that's come out. Elon's back in the news again with layoffs. And what I read so far is two execs and potentially 500 employees or more. And they're for the supercharger. And as you may or may not know, Elon opened up the superchargers to Ford and Rivian owners and potentially to other EVs in the future. However, there are a couple superchargers that have already been opened to all, not just Rivian or Ford, but to anybody who has an EV. And the only one I know about in the Bay Area is in Scotts Valley, but there might be, and I think there are two others in Southern California.
What is it? It's only in two places?
So Elon opened up the
Yeah.
superchargers
Everybody, right?
about 2 years ago,
Yeah.
right? And he included the adapter, if you
Right.
would. And so that way anybody who had an
Yeah.
EV could get a charge there.
Yeah, but that hasn't really happened or what?
No, that's happened.
Okay.
That's been going on for 6, 8 months. But recently in March, Elon opened up all superchargers to
Right.
Rivian and Ford owners, but you have to have an adapter.
Right. So is it actually functional and working for people yet? Because I've never seen anything but a Tesla getting charged.
No, there are. I've seen Rivians getting charged. I don't think I've seen Ford Lightnings or Ford Mustangs getting charged.
Okay.
But Rivian is sending out the adapters to everybody, and it's a slow process.
Hmm.
Or you can go out and buy the adapter for $200, which probably only costs about $10 to make. I'll
So
add
are there
that in
any
there.
charging stations for Fords and Rivians, or are they only for people who can charge at home?
So, ask your question again.
If you have a Ford or a Rivian,
Yes.
you have to charge it at home, or are there any chargers anywhere other than Tesla?
Yeah, so there's the Tesla supercharging network
Hmm.
that traditionally in the past was only for Tesla.
Yeah.
And as soon as you plug in the Tesla charger, even if you have an adapter to adapt another car to a Tesla charger, supercharger, the charger won't work because there's no screen. It's an app and you have to go through that.
Yeah.
So there are other companies out there, EVgo, EA America, Electrify America, Blink, and there are a few others out there that are trying to go in competition with Elon, if you will.
To
In
make
other words,
feel like new gas stations, right?
yeah,
I
these
think
are,
that's what, see, we have at the college, we have a couple, and they're not Tesla. They have like a big TV screen playing ads. So I think they must be one of those other brands.
yeah, those are the other brands. And if you go to the college, take a look next time and see if it's EVgo, Electrify America, or whoever it is, Blink. But let me tell you why this is kind of so important. And if Elon is not the Rockefeller of this era, I don't know who is, because he's definitely in charge of the charging network. And the reason that I say that is we need to go back a little bit in history. Remember the Volkswagen Dieselgate?
Oh, vaguely.
Yeah. So as part of that settlement, Volkswagen had agreed to pay 1 billion or $2 billion. I
That's
don't
because
remember which.
they were falsifying their emissions request.
Yeah, they were falsifying their emissions. And as part of the settlement, Volkswagen agreed to pay I think it was $2 billion in fines. The number isn't that important, but it was supposedly half of that was to build out the charging network in the United States. And they created a company called let's see, Electrify America, I believe. Yeah. And Electrify America is, at least in California and elsewhere, is the one that set up a lot of chargers. And these are what are called DC fast chargers. So that's like getting a fill up at a gas station in 20 minutes, half an hour. So the problem is, and there are other companies like Electrify America. There's another company, EVgo. There's another company called Blink. And then you have Tesla, and there are probably some others out there that I'm not aware of. But the problem is Blink had an issue with their network. And I know they're Blink chargers in the Bay Area, and their network was down. So you couldn't get a charge for days if you depended on the Blink network. I recently took a trip. We were there you go. I recently took a trip and we needed to get a charge.
Hmm.
And we went to EVgo, and there were 6 chargers all there. Out of the 6 chargers, 5 of them, the screens were dead. The only one with a working screen plugged in, and within a minute, you got a charging error. So you try and reset and you just give up. And we went to a different charger down the road a ways.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting right now in our area, and I'm talking Northern California. EVgo is their network is falling apart. In other words, they're not being maintained. You go there, the software doesn't work, or they claim that you can get a 300 kilowatt per hour charge when really you can only get 50 watts. And or actually a couple other locations I was at, we pulled in and we go to get a charge. You got to wait in line, but you look across the street literally, and there are 20 Tesla chargers there that are wide open.
Yeah, this is what I've read. The Tesla outnumbers all the rest by a lot.
Well, if you look at the numbers, and there's a little, it's a little misleading. The number of Tesla superchargers out there, the way they rate this is the number of chargers out there. So the non-Tesla chargers are 90%, and 10% are Tesla chargers.
Really?
However, if you look at the types of chargers, there's what's called a DC fast charge, which is the one that's like a gas station. And then there are the slow chargers, which are level 1, level 2. And when they count these other non-Tesla chargers, they're counting the level 1, level 2 that were installed like at public parking garages and
Mm.
hotels. These are the overnight chargers, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
They're not the fast chargers.
I guess, okay, I'm just thinking about, I've seen a couple parking lots where they have like 40 or 50 Tesla chargers.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
I've seen like private apartment complexes and stuff where they'll have like 1 or 2 spaces in the garage. So
yeah, yeah. So the 1 or 2 spaces are what are called level 2 chargers. They might be level 1.
yeah.
And just for clarification, level 1 is 120 volt. So it's the slowest possible way to charge.
Um,
And if you had a Tesla, you might be able to get fully charged within 24 hours, but most likely 30, over 30 hours.
mm,
Then they have a level 2 charger, which is 240 volt. So now we've doubled the voltage, and we double usually the current. And you can get a charge in maybe about 5 hours, 3, 4, 5 hours, depending on the charge. So easily overnight, you can get a charge. Then the third category is called a DC fast charger. And those are the ones that deliver, meaningful amount of energy in a short amount of time. However, when you talk about the DC fast chargers, there's there's a 50, a 100, a 150, a 300, and I think there might be a higher. And that just means the amount of current or kilowatt hours, kilowatts that can be pumped out in a certain amount of time. So obviously, and so this is a little misleading, and people don't kind of understand this. So if you have a like a Chevy Volt, if you pull into a DC fast charger, that or in a Nissan Leaf, let me kind of throw those in there. I think the Nissan Leaf can only DC fast charge at 50. The Bolt or the Bolt, not the Volt, but the Bolt, which is all electric, is limited to 75 or 100. But the charger could put out, say, 350. And if somebody pulls in with a Tesla, a Rivian, or a Ford, and you've got the Volt there at the 350 and not charging at the 100, then the person that can accept the faster charging rate is limited, because now the charger can only put out the lower current, the lower kilowatt hours. So in other words, it's a smaller charger. That not all DC fast chargers are the same.
Yeah.
And so what's happening is people who own a Volt or a Leaf, pardon me, a Bolt or a Leaf, and there's some other cars, they can't accept at the high rate. They can't accept the big garden hose, right? The big fire hydrant. They have to go to the small. They can go to the larger one, but they can only accept the
Right.
lower rate.
So they're going
So
to tie him up for a long time.
yeah, yeah. So instead of going to the appropriate one, and people are getting into fights over this, and so the solution to this, and I think this is where they're going, is they're all 350s, right? So that way everybody's equal, and
Right.
yeah. And
Well,
the other issue that I'm hearing too is that Tesla owners are furious that Rivians and Fords are charging there. Hey, you can't do that.
well, they're clogging up the station so they can't get in, right?
Yeah, but yeah, like you said, you look and there are 20 chargers or 30 chargers that, and we'll see how this works out. But this, so clearly from what I've seen, my experience is Elon has a supercharging network, and meaning the DC fast chargers.
Well, anyway, the news, right, is that he's
Yeah,
turning off big parts of the company, the whole supercharger division and the whole new vehicle division, which seems insane. Like
yeah,
what I read, that the investors are unhappy because there's only four. There's the S3, X, and Y models, and no new model in 2 years,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's no way to compete. So uh, I think there was a Mastodon comment that I think got it right. This is now like X. He's going to he's going to ruin Tesla the way he ruined Twitter. That's what it looks like by just firing everybody, like he did at Twitter.
Yeah, we'll see, right? This is an
Yeah.
experiment in process or in
Yeah.
progress.
Yeah. Well, there have been articles that said the only reason that Tesla survived is because, like Donald Trump's administration, there were a bunch of people around him that would stop most of what he said from happening. You just try to distract him with a shiny object so you don't have to implement all the crazy things. Like, Bill Barr just came out and said, oh, Trump would talk about just executing people all the time, and we just ignored him. It's okay. He wouldn't really do that. Say, wait a minute. Commander in chief gives you orders. Yeah, we would just ignore those orders and he would forget about it. So it's okay. I remember this is not in history. There were like 6-year-old infant kings who would say
Yeah,
stupid things, and like the minister would arrange to quietly not make that happen.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No different, right? No different at all.
That's right. We think
Yeah,
we've gone so far.
yeah. So we'll see, and I will tell you, what Elon is doing, people don't, it doesn't make any sense. But if there's somebody who's changed the world, he's I would argue that he's on par with he's definitely eclipsed Jobs in my opinion.
Yeah, like Edison or something. And I think this all goes to,
Yeah.
I think part of the lack of inhibition and the idea that everything you think should just happen is part of what makes this kind of leader. Sort of spoiled brat thing is part of how it works. So anyway, I've got some, are you there? Yeah, okay. Anyway,
Oh, Sam, you just froze. Let me
I thought you,
back for a moment.
yeah, I thought you froze too. Anyway, I want to talk about
Okay.
some AI models. Um, I was consulting for a company, and someone said, "Oh, you need a whole lot of hardware to run these large language models." And I said, "No, you don't." And so I went. The latest version from Meta, which is the most advanced, now has a really nice installer. You can just run it locally, and it runs just fine. And it's smarter than any of the others. In fact, it took me like a day to stump it. Normally, you just have to ask a few questions; it'll give you a stupid answer. But Llama 3 runs fast on a Mac M1, and you can ask it questions locally. And I was trying all the stuff it usually couldn't do, like how many N's are in the word origin. A typical LLM cannot answer that question. They'll get it wrong 2 times out of 3. And I finally stumped it. If you ask it to subtract 2 times that are like 150 seconds apart, it gets it totally wrong and tells you it's a whole day between them because it can't do math worth a damn. However, if you carefully tell it how to do it step by step, then it gets it right. So that was good to show. So it's like other LLMs, but it's really very smart. And the amazing thing is that it runs just fine on a laptop. And that's why, Apple is going to, in next iOS 18, Apple's going to have AI running on the phone, not sending any network traffic off to an API, because the phone can process an LLM. Once you've trained them, they really don't take a lot of processing to run. And
So, Sam,
yeah,
you're saying this is Meta?
yeah, Meta's latest LLM that came out last week is Llama 3. It is the smart one. It's very good. And you can download it and run it on your local machine, and it runs just fine.
So the reason I'm asking is I thought I caught a headline that investors in Meta are kind of upset with the amount of money that Zuckerberg has spent on AI.
They are. And I'm
Yeah,
surprised the
yeah,
Microsoft investors are not complaining either, because Microsoft gives the appearance of having figured out how to monetize AI, but it's fake. You pay $30 a month or something for Copilot, and it costs them more than that to run it.
yeah,
Nobody's found any way to actually make a profit yet. Now, most people haven't even found a way to get any revenue, and Microsoft at least has revenue, but not profit. But like all these tech things, everybody assumes they'll work that out, and they're pouring investment in it, billions,
yeah, yeah.
assuming that within a few years it'll be profit making. But that is not so clear at all. In fact, there's a couple of clues that it isn't. For example, I found the Gartner chart, and I was glad to find this, the Gartner hype cycle. And even in August of 2023, the Gartner
Yeah.
hype cycle has already put generative AI at the peak. It's falling, in their opinion, which is what I think too, as far as a business. And the other one is there's an article at futurism.com saying AI startups are suddenly in big trouble. You can already see the writing on the wall. Everybody is looking at it and comparing how much it costs to how much you can actually get from the customer and say, wait a minute, this is never going to work.
Yeah.
Everything up till now has been a speculative loss leader. And that's why my bets are on Microsoft. Microsoft has by far been the smartest company in this space. If anybody can do it, Microsoft can. But this is sort of like the early days of the internet when there was like Yahoo and stuff. Everybody was making these properties that got a lot of buzz but didn't make any money. And they're waiting
Yeah.
for someone to actually move in and have proper MBA business where you actually make money and weren't sure how you'd actually do it. And it's the same thing with AI. It does something, but how do you actually make money? Nobody knows yet.
Yeah. So with Meta, how do you how do you use it's Llama, right? I'm
Yeah,
not familiar
it's
with it.
Llama. Yeah.
How do you use it or how do you access it?
Just run it in a command line and then you ask it a question and it gives you an answer.
And how do you have to install it on your
Yeah.
machine?
Yeah,
Oh, I see.
just install it like anything else. You just run the installer, it goes on. It isn't very big. It has to download about 5 gigs of stuff.
Okay. Okay. That's what I'm asking. So
Yeah,
you don't
download.
you're not going to use the Facebook app and you're not going to use the Facebook web page.
Nope. And also all your data is now private, which is huge for companies.
Yeah.
Companies, including even like I think Google and Meta, have banned people using these public LLMs because you
Yeah.
simply,
Yeah.
so you really need to run it locally, which is how it came up in my consulting. I mean, people said we need to run it locally and that'll take a huge server. And I said, not really.
Yeah. So how is, if it's an app, I mean, not a mobile app, but if it's
Yeah.
an app you install on a desktop
Yeah.
or laptop, then how is Meta gonna monetize this?
That's why everyone is freaking out. And nobody knows how to monetize it worth a damn. Even Google hasn't even figured out how to put ads in it or anything. That's why
Yeah.
that's the problem.
Well, at least Microsoft has monetized it,
That's right.
and
Microsoft just
they've,
made you have to pay a monthly fee.
yeah, and
Although I've read that if you update your Windows and get
yeah.
Windows Copilot, it gives you access to all this stuff for free. So Office Copilot, I think people pay for it for the privacy.
I see. That could be, because I know I believe that there's a free version in Office, and
Yeah.
then there's a pay $30 a month.
Right. But the free version does in fact send your data to the cloud and
Yeah.
train. So it's really
Yeah.
useless for business.
So what I'm understanding is AI, it looks like, is successful for specialization. So in other words, not general AI, but maybe like protein folding.
Well,
And
that's what I thought, but I don't see much
yeah,
motion in that direction. But people seem to be viewing is seeing it as the replacement for search.
yeah, yeah,
But Google figured out how to monetize search, and they haven't figured out how to monetize this yet.
yeah. Well, we'll see. Again,
Yeah,
t- it's an experiment and process, and we'll see where this is going to go.
it is. Yeah. Well, you got a
And
Google story.
yeah, so let's go to Google. They lost their lawsuit. This was earlier this month. So Google was sued over incognito mode or private browsing mode. And
Yeah.
it turned out that it was a big farce, that when you went into private browsing mode, everyone thought and was under the impression that you're in private mode and that you weren't being tracked. But now we know for sure that Google collected data, and I think they have 10 billion data points on people. And I think as part of the settlement, Google has agreed to delete all that data. And if they do it or not, we'll never know for sure. And if they've sold it, we'll never know for sure.
Well, this reminds me of the lawsuit from 10 years ago where Google said they had anonymized your IP address, and all they did was like remove one quartet from it,
Yeah,
chat from
yeah,
it, and they still had the other
yeah.
cookie. So that's why I remember when Google took "Don't be evil" off their motto. They weren't kidding. Ever since then, they're just rapacious like a cartoon villain.
Well, isn't Google's motto right now, make as much money as you can?
Might as well be. That's why I kind of like Microsoft, where they never pretended it was ever anything else. We're here to make money. That's what we're for. It's capitalism. And, and these days they aren't even doing the horrible monopoly abuse. They seem to be an amazing leading company now in many ways.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about Microsoft and specifically Bill Gates
Yeah.
is, for 20 years, 30 years, he was the target of being evil. Remember the pie in the
Oh, yeah.
face?
Well, he
And
did pretty evil things too. I mean, there was some justification for that.
yeah, but is that unlike any other large corporation?
He hid a whole lot of powerful monopoly abuse. That the fact that when they had a monopoly on a desktop, he really
Yeah.
exploited it in a way that is got him in trouble with the big antitrust lawsuit. I mean,
Yeah, but who's in the antitrust lawsuit now?
well, supposedly Meta and Google and Amazon, they all need to be
And
logically,
Apple.
yeah, they all need to be broken up logically, but they seem to be too powerful to break up.
Yeah, but I mean, my point is that Gates was in the target and the crosshairs of a
Right.
lot of people,
Yep.
and he was considered evil. Microsoft was considered evil,
Yeah.
predatory, and typical capitalist company is what I would argue. And I would also argue it's not unlike GM, Ford, pick some other General Electric.
So they would all,
Um,
this is what Abigail Adams said, right? All men would be tyrants if they could.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what our country was founded on, right?
Well, you could say that, yeah.
All right.
Um,
Anyway, it's interesting that those those haters of Gates have kind of faded away into history,
yeah.
and they've now forgotten who's the latest target. Elon.
Well, Elon made himself a target with what he did at Twitter. You know, before he bought Twitter, he was just like all these others sort of in the background. Now he had
Yeah.
put all of his worst features right in your face on public display.
So yeah, in my mind, he's now replaced Gates as the target of,
Oh,
and
oh yeah, and it's
yeah,
part of his, like Donald Trump, being the man you love to hate is part of his brand. Just being famous makes the stock go up. And making sure every headline is about you is the main thing, whether it's good or bad.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So,
All right, what do you have for us next?
well, the Hacker News has a very interesting article about
Yes.
China's threat actor called Muddling Meerkat, an extra stupid name. But I didn't realize how the Great Firewall messed things up. I have articles about this for years. So the Great Firewall will choose will choose a website they don't like. And when they do, instead of just not letting you go to the website, they will report a random false DNS address for that website in order to poison the cache of any caching DNS servers. And they poison ones even outside China. That's why some people have been upset about this. And now what they're doing is they're putting out, that's why I like the caginess here. They say the threat actor who has not been identified is working in cooperation with someone who is controlling what the Great Firewall does. Well, who could that be that controls the Great Firewall in China? But anyway, it's putting out fake MX records, which are being used to like scan the internet or something. It's fake mail exchanges, and it goes to a whole bunch, it sends its recursive resolvers to a bunch of other domains, and somehow their theory is that this is some kind of scanner to carry out some kind of probe attack on the internet, which is very hard to understand. Um, so if user attempts to search for a blocked keyword or phrase, the Great Firewall blocks or redirects the website query in a manner that will prevent the user from accessing the requested information. And it injects a bogus DNS reply with an invalid IP address or an IP address to a different domain. So anyway, somehow the
Sam,
motivation
Sam,
behind this is unclear,
yeah.
but they think it's some kind of internet mapping or research effort. Anyway,
So Sam, it sounds like an ad blocker.
well, of course, the Great Firewall is like an ad blocker, but
Yeah.
not ad blockers just block the ads. This actually poisons the ads, so other people can't go there either.
Yeah. So again, kind of how DNS works. We have 13 core DNS
Yeah,
servers that are called the top level domain.
right.
And if you own those, and somebody did about 20 years ago on New Year's Day, they hijacked those, you own essentially the internet.
Well, everything is cached, so nothing would really change unless you own them for more than 24 days, for 24
Yeah,
hours.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I would agree.
yeah,
However, they only owned it for about 15 minutes, half an hour.
right.
So while there was an interruption of service, it was quickly rectified.
Yeah,
I'll say that.
yeah. But you know, the problem with DNS is you have all these servers working together, and the Great
Yeah.
Firewall puts out false data like poisoning the well.
But that would only be within China or downstream, correct?
No, that's the problem.
No?
It actually leaks out of the borders all around because your DNS resolvers will just find the closest one. So a
Yeah.
nation close to China will sometimes go to the poisoned ones, and then it will percolate around. When I taught the IPv6 certification class, I think you might have done that. There was this spot where you had to get your DNS record working, and it was amazingly. I would teach a class of like 20 students, and 10% of them, their DNS record would never update. You could follow it around the world. It would start updating and then get old copies, would copy over it. And 10% of my students would get so hosed that it was never going to resolve in days, and they just had to buy a new domain name and start over.
Really?
Yeah, the DNS infrastructure
Huh.
is echoing around among all these servers, and a lot of them are misconfigured or messed up in some
Yeah.
way that sometimes it just never resolves correctly at all.
Yeah, and these are DNS servers publicly available on the internet,
Yeah,
is what we're talking about.
and
Yeah,
run by all kinds of companies. And it doesn't take too many of them to be misconfigured before things start snarling up.
yeah, 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 and yeah, and these are difficult to unravel or find root causes of.
They are. I remember a few years ago, the City College website would be up and then it would be down for a day, and then it would be up and then it would be down for a day until I finally complained. And it was one of my students that had gone to Cloudflare that finally figured out what happened. I didn't know this. Every DNS update has like a version number. And
Yeah.
one of the authoritative server, I think, was handing out an old version. So
Oh,
you would get the
interesting.
old version from a server, and then you get an echo of supposedly a newer version coming in, undoing it. And so the IP address kept flapping,
Yeah.
the right number and the wrong number, and this would never stop until you found the server that was putting out the wrong version number and fix it.
Yeah, I've worked on troubleshooting issues, and that's exactly similar problem. The other is you can have a round robin DNS, and one of them is misconfigured or updates haven't been received. So if you have, say, 5 DNS servers, 4 times it works properly, the 5th time it fails. And so it makes troubleshooting issues like that much more difficult, much more challenging.
Yes, yes. Uh, like race conditions. Race conditions are crazy.
Yeah,
They only happen
yeah,
on high traffic and only 1 in 1,000 even then. So you think it's fine. You use it for years and you say, well, some of these customers are whining, but they must be just lying. It can be a long time before you actually admit there's a problem and find it.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's different. We talked, I think last time or a few episodes ago about GM's key switch, right? And how it would flip. The spring was
Yeah.
less tension,
Yeah.
and the ignition switch would go into the accessory position, and people are dying in crashes. And for 10 years, GM said, oh, it's user error. It's the people driving the cars.
Yeah, well, I understand it. I mean, I remember years ago when I taught tech support and I would say, oh, people are just making up these crazy reports. After a while, I realized I quit saying that, because
Yeah,
the craziest things would come in and I said, well, I remember a few years ago I would have said you're nuts, but now I'm not so sure you're nuts. Really crazy things
yeah.
would happen.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
I may have mentioned it before, but I remember the one that really got me was a student in class said, my computer can't get to the internet. I said, well, open a command prompt and do a ping Google. Well, that works fine. Really? So open a browser and go to Google, nothing goes through. We checked it. Packets less than like 100 bytes would go through fine. Anything larger would be thrown away. And the cure was to reboot the switch. There was just a dumb $10 switch. You pull out the power, put it back in. The switch was throwing away the large packets, but not the small ones.
Really?
And I remember when Vista came out,
Hmm.
I couldn't get to the internet at home. And one of my students, Kirk, said, oh, your router is incompatible with Vista. And I said, don't talk nonsense. The operating system on the computer has nothing to do with the router. He said, no, I'm not kidding. I looked it up and he was right. That
And
router wouldn't work if your computer was running Vista.
and do you know why? Did you ever?
No, I would
No.
have thought
Okay.
that's impossible. I remember another time the City College website was down for like a week. So I called the guy in charge of it and he said, did you try a different browser? They sent me an email. I was actually writing an angry email. What do you think? I'm an idiot. Changing the browser is not going to change anything. I said, well, before I send this angry email, I'll try it.
Try it.
Totally worked in Firefox, but it wouldn't work in IE or else the other way around. He said, yeah, this is a known problem with Palo Alto firewalls. They'll block one browser, but not the other until you reboot the firewall.
Really?
And I
That's
thought the traffic
bizarre.
was exactly the same for the different browsers.
Yeah, I wonder, there must be some tag or identifier in there, and
Like
it's
the user,
interesting.
well, there's the user agent, I guess.
Yeah,
I mean, I think
yeah,
the
and
firewall must be so smart that it actually notices the browser and it has some rule to like block browsers that gets configured incorrectly or something.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Or maybe it's some denial of service that it's flagged as an attacker or
Yes,
malware or something. I don't know.
I
Okay,
think
anyway, we don't know.
I think with experience, you blame
Yeah,
the end user a lot less.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
All right, I agree with you on that
You've
one.
got
You have
car
another?
seat. No, you go.
Yeah, cars. My turn. Okay, so we were talking about car seats.
Mhm.
This is an interesting one, and I never would have thought of this, but they have weight sensors, not occupancy sensors in cars. So we talked about GM selling data. It turns out from sources I've read that they're able to measure your weight. So they know the weight of the person in the car. And that's some of the data that GM was selling.
I was
So,
thinking, do they inform the donut shops to turn on the sign because a fat person is driving by or something? I mean, what good is this data to them?
well, that's what one would wonder, but you know who the person is, and you'd sell it to the healthcare insurance companies. And so now that they potentially know that you're overweight.
Oh,
So we talked about insurance, car insurance rates going up. You know, this could relate to healthcare insurance rates increasing. I don't know that for sure because we don't know, but that's that's one implication of this of having data being sold by your car.
it's hard to
Or
see what you need to know that for. It's not like you need to balance the car like an airplane.
no, I think what happened is they put in a sensor in there,
Yeah.
and the sensor detects if in the driver's seat that a driver is there. In the passenger seat, it detects if someone is there to turn the airbag on or off.
Okay.
But we're only talking about the driver because that would be a known entity. The passenger, you wouldn't have any idea who that is.
Yeah.
Or GM, I'm picking on GM because they're
Yeah.
the ones that were selling the data. And as far as we know, other companies might possibly be doing it, but we don't have any facts to support that claim at this time.
It's amazing how much money people get by selling our data everywhere. It's
Ah, yeah,
my first thought when I learned about internet cookies as well, this can't be worth much, but apparently it's worth a lot.
yeah. And there are ways that there are ways that that data is being monetized that I think we don't have a clue about.
Yeah.
And if somebody brings it up like, oh, the weight sensor in the car, then you say, oh, I could see how that works with the healthcare insurance companies wanting to know that.
I guess. Yeah. They
But
even know how
because,
it's changing over time.
yeah. And yeah, yeah. I mean, there might be an app for this in Apple Health or some of the Fitbits,
Yeah.
right? Tie in. But yeah, your weight would be between your doctor and the patient. So there's a confidentiality. And this is a way for healthcare companies to get that information. And I will say legally, there are no laws against it, is what I'm getting at, I guess.
Yeah, and you could even argue a moral cases here because there's a whole lot of medical studies where they have to admit, we don't really know what people ate. We just have to ask them to fill out a survey and tell us what they ate, even though we know that's pretty unreliable. We don't really know
Yeah,
how much they drink. We don't really know how much they exercise. If they could like have some direct measure of those things, then they would have better medical statistics.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting. This data privacy,
Yeah.
um, a lot of people are poo-pooing it and ignoring it. But then all of a sudden they say, "Oh, why my car insurance go up?"
Yeah.
And it's yeah, and here, why is my healthcare insurance going up?
Yep.
Or why am I being charged more? So yeah,
Yep.
um,
Big
it
Brother is
is
watching.
yeah. Well, and making money.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's not the government, it's just the advertising industry, capitalism.
Yeah. And since TikTok has been in the news, we should bring this up again. I've heard the claims by politicians, oh, TikTok is collecting your data and they're going to be using it for evil purposes. And anybody who knows or understands the industry,
Yeah.
why would China do that or ByteDance? Why would they do that
Oh,
when they can buy it for less
yeah.
money?
Yeah. Also, yeah, I know that's the part that makes no sense to me. I don't even know what they want to do with it. I mean, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, we don't know what they want to do with it, but potentially they want to monetize it. But they could buy it for less money by buying it through American data brokers and
sure.
using a proxy American company.
And if they're monetizing it, who cares? That's not a national security issue. That's just what every other company is doing. That's not hurting
Yeah,
us more than Google or Amazon is.
yeah, yeah. But the one thing, since I brought up TikTok,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you've heard this stat, but most people under 30 get their news from TikTok.
Oh yeah, they do. That's why the media people I listen to on podcasts, they all say this is absolutely right. They should have banned it because there's already a rule that you can't have more than a 20% foreign stake in a major TV network. And they said we can't have an influential news network owned by a foreign hostile nation. They just to them it's obvious.
Yeah, but it's not a news network.
It is just like you said, it is de facto. You could argue that Fox News is not a news network either. Like, look at the
True.
trial of Donald Trump. The whole premise of that trial is people were reading the National Enquirer and believing it. And
Right,
apparently
right.
they do. So I think that's very close to TikTok. You have this ridiculous source of information that's obviously unreliable, and yet some large portion of people actually believe that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, but they also believe the National Enquirer. They
Yeah.
believe the Earth is flat. They believe we didn't land
Well,
on the moon.
but
All
but
those conspiracy.
I know, but
Yeah.
obviously then China could apparently influence like our election or anything else they wanted to with propaganda put on TikTok. I guess that's true.
Yeah, well, it would be cheaper. Yeah, as we know from who is it, Cambridge Analytics, that they gamed. I'm
Facebook's
not going to say the
targeted ads. Yeah.
election. Yeah, I'm not going to say the election was fixed, but they were able to target advertising
Right.
to influence the election.
That's right. And that's what I think people are afraid of. There's no evidence it's happened, but
Correct. Yeah.
it could happen. So I do understand the argument. As a national security matter, any source of news that affects some large portion of the population should really not be controlled by a hostile nation. That kind of makes sense.
Yes, it should be controlled by those American newspaper owners.
Yeah,
We need to bring it back to America. Have them in control.
well,
Who
the
who do we?
result the result is that Murdoch actually had to get American citizenship in order to poison us with Fox News.
Yeah.
So, but technically the government did have some opportunity to sort of say no somewhere along there. So,
Yeah, but the news, right? News sources align with political parties, do they not?
well, I think they do just what they do is they do whatever it takes to make money. And I think in the current climate in America, they have learned that you have to pick one side or the other in order to get a large audience. Like a few people try to hit the
Yeah.
middle, like CNN's trying to hit the middle, and the only result is everybody hates you now.
Right, 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 right.
So
Oh, they're talking about the other candidate, and I know he's evil.
if there
And
was
that's what
there
that's
was
what
a way
both
to make
sides are
money
saying.
by being in the middle, they would go there.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But right, the only way to
But
make money is to be on the right or the left.
yeah, you have to be at extremes because
Yeah,
then you're as part of the herd. We've
right.
talked about herd mentality.
Yeah.
And when you're part of your social group, you feel good and you want to contribute to it.
Well, yeah, you want yep, you want to feed people what they want to hear. I remember
Yeah.
I read articles about the internal debate around Fox News after 2020, but the election wasn't stolen, but Biden won. They said, "Yeah, we tried telling them that and the audience hated it. We've learned we better tell them what they want to hear." They were all tuning out and going to Newsmax. The only way to bring them back is to tell them, "Oh no, Donald Trump won. The election was rigged. Even though it's false, that's what they want to hear, and we should respect our viewers." And that's one way
Yeah.
to look at it.
Yeah. So, Sam, who began, where all this started, at least in modern media times, I'll phrase it that way, is remember Rush Limbaugh?
Oh yeah, yeah. You can
Okay. Yeah. So he was the first one, little history, to go into syndication. Actually, I think he was second. There was at a KGO, or actually Sacramento, and then KGO radio. It was Dr. Dean Adele, who is America's doctor
I
on
remember
the air.
him. Yeah.
Yeah, so he was the first one to go into syndication. Then Rush Limbaugh followed him. But, Dr. Dean Adele is talking about medical issues. Rush
Stuff was
Limbaugh was
pretty good.
politics.
His stuff seemed pretty good and accurate to me, Gina Dell.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, but it's medical. And
Yeah,
Rush Limbaugh came in with, politics, political
yeah.
agenda, which is more, people are more charged about that, more interest.
And his whole thing was this angry presentation and total disregard for the facts, which has just been amplified more and more. You end up with Tucker Carlson and stuff. It's
Right.
entertainment form, feeding you stuff that will create an emotional reaction.
Yeah. And what's interesting is I saw an interview with Rush Limbaugh, and where did he get his playbook? This
I
was
don't know.
interesting. He got it from Dr. Goebbels, from the Nazis.
Well, yeah,
And
yeah,
and he said, that's the formula that we're using.
yeah,
And look at how successful it is.
yeah,
Meaning now, it obviously was successful then.
yeah.
And he said that was the winning formula.
It is. Yeah, they were breakthrough pioneers in propaganda.
Yeah, yeah. And Rush Limbaugh used that formula and was highly successful,
Yeah.
I would argue.
No, I think it's
And
arguably a huge social engineering attack, and we, like all other forms of social engineering, we really don't have good defenses.
yeah, yeah. And as you pointed out, it's now evolved, and we have lots of other people. Yeah, one person I haven't heard, whatever happened to Ken Beck? Do you remember him?
I don't.
Or maybe that's not his name, Beck. He wrote a number of books. He was out there for a while. He seemed
Glenn Beck.
Glenn Beck, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I think he irritated people at Fox, and he, like Tucker Carlson and so many others, it turned out that without being on Fox, he had nothing.
Oh, so they fired him, or
I
he
think
parted
so.
ways?
I happened to a bunch of people thought they were the king, but it really was just that they were on Fox. Like Tucker Carlson has also fallen to much less importance. You know, it's actually the
Interesting.
channel more than it's the personality.
Yeah, so the channel is the entertainment value,
Yeah. And you have,
and it's
yeah,
it's not the personality.
not so as much as they think. And that keeps on happening. One guy becomes the star of the show, and then he starts throwing his weight around and thinking he's the boss until he finally makes too much trouble and they fire him. And then they find out that in fact they can just put another star in that position and the show will go on. Although I don't know
Yeah,
who the star of Fox News is now.
I don't know
But anyway,
either.
I got one more story. My last
Okay.
is the one I thought was the most interesting because we brought up on this podcast for years, especially with Caitlin here, the problem of space junk and the Kessler
Oh,
effect, where the satellites are colliding and they're making more junk. And we already may well be into this position where they collide more often than the junk can fall out of orbit, to where orbit's going to become unusable within a few decades because there'll be so much junk up there. And I kept wondering, isn't there some way to clean it up? And now Japan has made a orbit cleaner, which is up there. Now, they have not actually begun harvesting things, but they put up the first prototype. It's called Address J, and it was sent up there to find a rocket body. And right now, they've just shown as a proof of concept. It looks like this is going to work. They think they can, at some affordable cost, actually pull down the dead satellites. So I don't know
and
how. Yeah.
yeah, and what are they going to do with them?
Well, I think you just need to shove them down so they'll burn up in the atmosphere. The point is they're going to stay up there forever and eventually
Yeah,
collide with each other and make more and more junk. So you need to go up with some kind of a rocket and push them either up or down.
yeah. You need to bump their orbit.
Yeah. And apparently
Uh,
this is
hmm.
the finished phase one of the commercial removal of debris demonstration project. Phase two is scheduled for 2026, and then they aim to remove debris from orbit as a proof of concept for commercial space junk disposal services. So I'm very optimistic about this. I think this has to happen, and I'm glad somebody has found some way to do it at an affordable cost.
Yeah. I heard that one plan was to use something like a giant Nerf ball.
Yeah,
And
I don't know. Unfortunately, there's no details yet on exactly what they're going to do, but
yeah,
they have a plan. And sort of like removing carbon dioxide from the air, this is something that has to happen, and somebody needs to find some way to do it at scale and cheap enough.
yeah. And, we also need to do that for the oceans too.
Right, right,
And we've got those enormous garbage patches out there.
right.
And yeah, I know there are a number of companies working on that. I wonder which one's going to be easier.
Yeah, I remember I heard a few years ago a guy say if you had a young person today, the real booming economy of the future is going to be carbon capture. That's where we're going to have, instead of like power plants, we're going to have giant carbon capture plants, and people in that industry are going to really make money. I don't know if that's true, but it probably is correct. I mean, within the next couple of decades, it's going to be so important. That's where we're going to be doing.
Yeah, but Sam, carbon capture, cleaning up space, cleaning up the oceans,
Yeah.
there's no way to monetize that,
Well, I
or at least not that we know of so far.
I think it has an obvious reward, and the pressure to do it will just mount and mount until we're forced to do it.
Yeah, and this is where we kind of all have to come together as a world because, it just takes one country to produce, one large country to produce a lot of CO2, while another one's trying to vacuum it up. You all have to work together on this. It's like being in a lifeboat or a submarine.
Yeah, yeah. But in the grand scheme of things, the pressure to do it will just get larger and larger until you respond.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll
Right.
see.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Well, that's it for me this time. How about you?
Me too. So we'll have another one on Friday.
And let's see, is Friday Cinco de Mayo? Nope, but it's getting close.
Getting close. And
It's
RSA
getting
is
close.
coming up, and B-side San Francisco. We're beginning the summer hacker season.
Yeah. Hey, do you know when the RSA is?
Yes, it's on my website. I think it's next week. Let me bring up the page.
No, okay.
RSA is May 6 to 9. So
May
about a
s-
week away.
Oh,
Yeah.
so will you be attending?
I'll be there on one day in the Dark Arts Village. I'm giving a talk on Thursday. Thursday's college day too. That's when all the students are there.
Ah, okay. All
So
right.
getting for free on Thursday. And of course, I hope all my students know you can get free expo passes by just Googling free RSA expo pass. Vendors just hand them out at this time of year. Anybody can get a free expo pass for what
There
it's
you
worth.
go.
Then you can wander around that giant Monty Hall place with a bag and get a bunch of like t-shirts and thumb drives and stuff.
Yeah, you know what I call you get when you go there, the first thing you get is a nice bag,
Yeah,
and then you go around with the bag and you trick or treat with all the vendors.
you can do that if you want to. Yep, yep.
Yeah.
And the
All
village,
right,
I
Sam.
think on Thursday you can get to the villages though, and the villages are fun.
I see.
They've
Okay.
got a lockpicking village, they've got a Sands Net Wars village, they've got all kinds of things like that, which are pretty fun.
Wait, in RSA, they're
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
the lock picking?
yeah, yeah. They have villages for everything. Just sort of like,
Really?
yeah, it only had it the last few years, and it's a lot more fun than it used to be.
Yeah, so they're kind of not as corporate anymore. They're starting to kind of go into DEF CON-ish and B-sides.
And the training events have gotten good. I got to go to a couple of them, and they're really getting good. The hands-on trainings are pretty impressive. So it's getting a lot.
Wow.
It's a lot better than it used to be. It used to be like going to a boring talk show with like heads of state giving carefully prepared speeches with no content. It's
Yeah,
gotten a lot. It's
yeah.
gotten a lot better.
So it's kind of they're adding, I don't know if you remember the Gong Show. Those are, those videos are resurfacing on YouTube, and I wonder if they've been in reruns, but that was kind of a whimsical show
Yeah.
that had an audience, but it was kind of more or less corporate, if you will, far less corporate.
Yeah, well, there's still a bit of corporate stuff there. I must say, part
Yeah,
of it is also that I've grown up and I'm more tolerant of management now. I used to be a
yeah,
scruffy punk hacker where I just wanted to hack into things. Now I'm sort of more interested in seeing boring management talks about how do you actually protect things.
yeah, yeah. Well, you got to understand both sides. If you get hacked, and you got to make money to keep
Yeah.
people employed, and you got to keep things protected. So yeah, all right.
It's
I
like
think
politics.
this.
You know, I care about
Yeah,
politics now, and when I was young, I couldn't understand politics at all. It just seemed like a waste of time.
yeah, yeah. Well, Sam, I think you're right. This is a close for this one, and we'll see
All
you
right.
next Friday.
Sounds good. Okay.